I seriously doubt that anyone living today has never heard of Walmart. A gallon of milk, a shotgun, and a flat-screen TV may all be purchased in one trip at what is known as the everything store. Something nasty lurks beneath the shiny blue. Signs and rollbacks, though. Graveyard Shift in Bentonville, Arkansas, the empire's origin, is where I worked, so I know. This Walmart isn't like any other. The pioneering store of its sort. This is Walmart, the flagship store that has been serving customers continuously since 1962, when the firm was founded. The massive, antiquated, and seemingly living structure feels like a monument in and of itself. A swarm of bees flits across the fluorescent lights above, and the aisles seem to go on forever, with shelves that are endlessly stocked yet never perfectly clean. It has the air of an artificially executed machine, with all the parts not quite fitting together. The job was not something I desired. No one ever imagines themselves as a Walmart overnight stalker when they're little. You accept what you can get when you're 24 years old, drowning in school debt and failing your third major. The landlord at my dilapidated apartment refused to replace the heating, and the wallpaper was falling off the walls. For that reason, I applied after seeing the job posting. A collection of shelves and boxes is all it is. What if it were bad? During the interview, Gary, the manager, didn't probe too deeply. Your hiring is official. Begin on Monday, he announced with a simple grunt and an inspection of my body language befitting a butcher. That ought to have been the first warning sign, but I was unprepared. Everything that occurs after 3 in the morning, including the scanner, the rules, and the details, was news to me. The fact that Walmart was keeping secrets so massive they could engulf an ordinary person like me was completely unknown to me. Exactly 10 minutes after the clock struck 10, I arrived. With the exception of a few dispersed vehicles and a semi-truck unloading boxes at the loading dock, the parking area is almost deserted. I felt as big as a monster as I approached the Bentonville Walmart. Under the fluorescent light, its enormous sliding doors glowed subtly. It seemed strangely empty for a 24-hour establishment, but I assumed business was slower throughout the night. Standing by the entrance, Manager Gary held a clipboard and a styrofoam cup of coffee. His nod was more of a caution than an invitation. I wasn't late, yet he still stated that. Punch in and go to work. Midnight is when you get a break. Take action without delay. Traditional Gary, rude, unyielding, and intolerant of small chat. He led me to the warehouse while simultaneously passing me a bright yellow vest. As I followed his instructions, the maze of aisles seemed to go on forever in the dim light. The warehouse was in shambles. There are tall shelves full of cardboard boxes, forklifts parked in an unorganized fashion, and you can almost hear the faint hum of machinery far away. Already hard at work, a couple of other night stalkers were moving pallets and scanning products with the company's distinctive barcode scanners, their expressions devoid of emotion. I didn't notice it until then. It turned out that one scanner was unique. Its screen displayed glitchy static as it sat on the charging dock, flickering weakly, in an unpredictable pattern. The top light, which is typically a constant green, blinked between red and blue. For a brief second, I felt an eerie attraction to it, as if it were beckoning to me. Well, hello there, Jack. I was about to lose consciousness when I heard Gary's barking from behind me. Tonight, you'll be in aisle 7, so get your scanner ready. I took up the strobing scanner with some reluctance. I tapped it, and the static disappeared, and the screen returned to its usual Walmart inventory state. However, an unsettling feeling persisted, as if it were disproportionately heavy. I ignored the intuition and made my way to aisle 7. Aisle 7 resembled a cemetery for abandoned goods, with clumped piles of sale DVDs, unused cereal boxes, and haphazardly placed holiday decorations. I began by scanning each item as I unpacked the first package, which contained canned soup. A monotone beep from the scanner resounded along the deserted aisle as it pulsed briefly. The beeping, however, changed after a short while. The sound was different from what one would expect. There was a pattern to the tempo. It was almost rhythmic. Looking down at the screen, I scowled. A message was shown by the scanner instead of the typical inventory details. Scan no more than 3 consecutive items at a time. This is the first rule. I blinked. My mind racing. Could this be a joke, some sort of error? Half expecting another stalker to leap out and shout gotcha, I glanced around. However, there was complete silence throughout the aisle, broken only by the gentle hum of the lights above. All right. I quietly put the scanner aside for a second. Convinced that I was simply overtired, I rubbed my eyes. The notice had vanished, and the regular inventory page had taken its place when I resumed using the scanner. With an uneasy laugh, I returned to my job. However, I couldn't escape the unsettling sensation that an unseen presence was observing my every move. The shop had settled into an eerie cadence by midnight. Aside from the low buzz of the stockroom conveyor belt and the occasional clatter of a stalker carrying boxes, the aisles were strangely silent. The buzz of the overhead fluorescent lights made their way into my brain as they flashed sporadically. The store seemed to be pulsating with life, its mechanical buzz matching the beat of the music. I had only just begun to peruse the soup cans in aisle 7. I tried to ignore the mounting anxiety in the back of my mind. As I became accustomed to the predictable beeping of the scanner and the monotony of the routine, the scanner then abruptly released a lengthy, drawn-out beep. I stood there, transfixed by the gadget. After a brief blackout, the screen began to glow with the arrival of a single line of text. First rule, you shouldn't scan the same thing more than 3 times in quick succession. I blinked, my mind racing. The letters were uneven and jagged, giving the impression that the text had been produced quickly. I fooled myself into thinking it was a temporary problem, yet another evidence of the antiquated technology for which Walmart was known. Yet, the text remained still on the screen. Oh my goodness, looking down the aisle, I said something under my breath. Nothing was there. Like unspoken eyewitnesses, the rows of orderly soup cans stared back at me. Then I rubbed my temples and put the scanner down. It's simply exhaustion, Jack. I reassured myself, simply said, it's an error. Resuming use of the scanner, I saw that the notice had vanished and the standard inventory interface had taken its place. With a sigh of relief, I resumed scanning, despite a tiny tremor in my hands. However, it transpired once more. The scanner beeped loudly and flashed red on the screen, warning not to scan the same item more than 3 times in a row. I was in the middle of scanning another case of soup when it happened. I felt queasy. I didn't scan the same thing twice, did I? In a state of mental chaos, I shopped through the cans. There was no logic behind it. All it was soup. Out of nowhere, I felt a chilly tingle, like if someone were peering down my neck. My gaze swept the aisle behind me as I gently spun around. Even though there was no one around, the air had a stronger, almost electric, tension to it. I mumbled something under my breath as I reinserted the scanner into its holster. This is becoming ridiculous. However, the scanner beeped once more as I began to roll the cart down the aisle. Words weren't seen on the screen this time. The screen showed the following numerical sequence: 7-39. Tell me what I'm looking at. In a low voice, I spoke. As I fixated on the numbers, my palms became sweaty and my heart raced. I pressed every button on the gadget in an attempt to clear the screen, but to no avail. In a subtle blink, the numbers remained. Once more, the beeping slowed down, becoming nearly rhythmic. It was as if time were ticking away to a certain point. Half expecting to see someone standing there, I glanced over my shoulder and saw that the aisle remained vacant. Over the store's public address system, a barely discernible voice crackled, scarcely distinguishable from the ambient mild hum. Return to your duties, Jack. Stop slacking off, Gary said in a monotone voice. I clutched the scanner firmly as I forced myself to swallow. Sure thing, boss, I whispered, fully aware that he was unable to hear me. However, the screen flashed once more, showing a fresh message. As I redirected my attention to the shelves, principle number 2, get out of the way and check behind you. If the scanner starts blaring before it scans anything, watching the scanner become silent made my heart race. The abrupt silence was even more annoying than the beeping. It squished up against my ears, making even the faintest faraway sound more audible. I swung around, taking my time. I thought I saw something move at the far end of the aisle, just beyond the convex mirror. But the aisle was still vacant. More regulations were revealed to me that night. They're all creepier than the one before. They were not sudden apparitions. In reality, the scanner beeped irregularly and flashed each new regulation on the screen as I worked. Scan no more than 3 consecutive items at a time. This is the first rule. Rule number 2. Pause and check behind you if the scanner begins to beep without scanning anything. No leaving a cart in aisle 12 unattended is the third rule. Get it to the rear as soon as possible if that's the case. Fourth rule. Always return scanned items to their original location if the screen prompts you to do so. Fifth rule. Promptly clock out and leave if your own name appears on the scanner. Your shift is not over. My hands were trembling so terribly by the end of the night that I could hardly hold the scanner. To me, the rules were like pieces of a jigsaw that fit into a bigger image that I couldn't make sense of. It was obvious, though, that this wasn't your average employment. It was a much darker thing. As the clock struck 1 in the morning, the fluorescent lights inside the store became increasingly stifling. A static buzz that sounded like it was resonating through the whole structure. Their incessant hum bore into my brain. Now the regulations were permanently imprinted in my brain. Whenever I scanned an item, they would flash like warning signs. Fearing that I could trigger another message, I worked carefully and cautiously. It transpired while I was in aisle 12, which was devoted to condiments and canned products. The screen flashed red and the word return appeared boldface just as I was about to scan a jar of pickles. I felt a sudden racing heart. Fourth rule. Return the item to its original location if prompted to do so by scanning it. I glanced at the container held in my palm. A dozen of these ordinary jars of pickles would be readily available at any supermarket. It shouldn't have been any different. The scanner doesn't need to worry about it. However, the caution remained solidly displayed on the screen. I swallowed hard and redirected my attention to the shelf. I strained my memory to recall the precise spot where I had taken it. Whose row was it? The center or the top? After slipping the jar onto the shelf, my hands trembled, and I tried again and again, doubting my abilities with each attempt. The scanner made a loud beep sound. A flashing message saying incorrect appeared on the screen. A wave of terror washed over me. Excuse me, but what does that even mean? A low-level grumble escaped me. I scanned the container once again, in the hopes that it would reset, but all I got was the return command repeated on the screen. My chest heaving, I slapped the jar back into what I thought was the correct location and stepped away. This time, the scanner remained silent, but it felt much more painfully silent. It seemed as if the shop was keeping an eye on me, anticipating my next gaffe. I remained in aisle 12, my gaze fixed on the jar of pickles that I had just set on. The shelf, only the faint buzz of the lights could be heard, creating an ear-splitting hush. I was about to get my cart and go, but I noticed something in the corner of my eye that made me stop. It was the convex security mirror at the very end of the aisle that grabbed my eye. Countless times tonight, I had passed it by mindlessly. However, from this point on, things were different. In an effort to decipher the mirror, I narrowed my eyes. With its twisted arc, the aisle extended behind me, its shelves stacked with rows of identical things, just a few feet behind me. My cart was parked, but something seemed off. The cart wasn't where I'd left it in the reflection. It was down the aisle a little ways away. I was getting closer to the pickle jar when I made my comeback. The cart hadn't budged, so I whirled around in my anticipation. The wheels were securely fastened to the worn tile floor, and it remained exactly where I had left it. My heart was thumping, so I slowly turned back to look in the mirror. More was visible this time. Someone was standing at the far end of the aisle, with the shelves half obscuring them. A towering figure, barely visible, its shape vague but unmistakably present. I felt a tense moment coming on as I fixated on the reflection in the mirror. Stillness engulfed the figure. It did nothing more than stand and observe me. I spun around once more, my heart thumping in my ears. Silence and stillness filled the aisle as rows of shelves and objects stood alone, devoid of any shadows or figures. The apparition was vanished by the time I returned my attention to the mirror. I snarled and snatched my cart, hurriedly pushing it into the break room. As I shook the handle with quivering hands, my legs felt as heavy as lead. Rules were no longer important to me. Someone had to tell me. surprisingly. The break room was chilly. In one corner, the vending machines emitted a low-volume hum, their fluorescent screens throwing an unsettling light over the room. I sank into one of the inexpensive plastic seats, my knees quivering all the while. Across from me, Mike sat, his styrofoam coffee cup in his hands. The shadows beneath his eyes were darker and more noticeable, and his complexion was pallid. As I walked in, he glanced up at me with a glum expression. He spoke in a flat voice, describing you as looking as if you had seen a ghost. I let out a sharp chuckle, probably just now. From the scanner and the regulations to the jar of pickles and the reflection in the mirror, I filled him in on every detail. His scowl intensified. His fingers tapped uncomfortably on the table as he shook his head. By the time I was through, for the first time, he admitted that you were in over your head. Please tell me what's happening. Mike, leaning forward, I made my demand. Why are there regulations? Just why is the scanner acting this way? Furthermore, what was that reflection in the mirror? With an expression on his face that suggested he was expecting an unexpected visitor, Mike paused, his eyes darting to the break room door. He murmured something about how this facility isn't like every other. The original Walmart was located in Bentonville. They put it to use for testing systems and technologies that are well beyond what the general public is aware of. They don't want us to know that the regulations and scanners are just pieces of a larger puzzle. Is it a more substantial thing? My voice rose as I inquired. Mike massaged his temples and let out a sigh. Everyone must adhere to the regulations, so the shop can secure it in. When you disobey the rules, the system becomes unreliable. When that happens, danger ensues. It made my stomach turn. How perilous is it? Without a word, Mike met my gaze. Avoid finding out if at all possible. Okay, Jack, just do as I say. No matter how strange or terrifying things get, you must adhere to the rules. I refrained from returning to aisle 12, honestly. I had little interest in revisiting any of the aisles. I drank a flat drink from the vending machine and lingered in the break room for as long as I could, attempting to rationalize Mike's behavior. I knew I couldn't hide indefinitely when I heard Gary's crackling intercom voice, instructing us to finish replenishing by 3 a.m. I hoped the cleaning supplies aisle would be empty and peaceful. When I retrieved my card, it was for a brief period. Bleach and floor cleaning bottles were stocked, products were checked, and I tried to ignore the mounting feeling of unease in my pit of the stomach. A beep went out from the scanner. I first dismissed it as a typical, unimportant sound. Rapid, harsh, and unimportant. My pulse rate dropped to a freezing point the second I looked at the screen. Fifth rule: promptly clock out and leave if your own name appears on the scanner. Your shift is not over. With shaky palms, I gazed at the screen. The message flashed briefly before vanishing, and the regular inventory display took its place. Jack Turner, inventory mistake, showed up again when I scanned a box of sponges. The scanner made a louder beep, and the word "leave now" appeared across the screen once more. I let go of the scanner as my pulse raced. It fell to the floor. With a clang that reverberated across the deserted aisle, my name had been displayed. My gut told me to get out of there, but I had no idea what it meant. A shadow swept over me as I swung around to face the storefront. A tall, deformed figure with flashing red eyes stood at the end of the aisle. It didn't budge or utter a sound, but I could sense its intense stare immobilizing me. The floor-mounted scanner gave one last beep. A flicker lit up the screen. Then fresh, icy, run-related terms emerged. That was it. My breath came out in quick, terrified gasps as I sprinted toward the entrance of the store. The sound of heavy, slow-moving footsteps resounded behind me. They didn't sound human. My racing heart took me on a mad dash through the aisles. Even though I had left the scanner on the floor of aisle 12, its relentless beeping continued to echo in my thoughts, as if the whole store was reacting to my terror. The fluorescent lights up above flickered violently. The shadows, which appeared to twist and stretch in an unusual way, gathered in the corners of the aisles. With each stride, I sensed a growing weight, as if an invisible force were drawing me further into the store. I froze when I veered down an unmarked aisle, almost tripped on a patch of detergent that had spilled. There was nothing but empty space on the shelves all around me. Dusted metal racks remained in their place of the merchandise that had previously occupied the aisles earlier in the evening. I could feel a faint vibration on the floor and a gentle hum in the air. It finally hit me. At the very end of the hall stood a convex mirror, its surface now deformed and fractured. However, it continued to mirror the empty room behind me. Upon seeing the apparition once more tall, dark, with burning red eyes, my blood froze. However, it was moving at a faster pace than before. As it approached me in the mirror, its steps were quiet yet methodical. I pivoted to confront it, yet it remained empty. Nothing but the vacant aisle, which seems to go on forever in either direction. It was as if a deep, guttural voice were whispering in my ear, telling me to leave. With the words of Rule 5 ringing in my ears, I dashed towards the entrance of the store. Stop working. Promptly go. Your shift is not over. The automated doors would not open even after I got to the front of the store. I pounded the glass with my fists, but they wouldn't budge. Lighted by a subtle blue hue, the register panels turned on sequentially. Suddenly, the store's atmosphere was shaken when Gary's voice resounded from the overhead speaker. His voice was eerily calm as he addressed Jack. "Where have you been? You haven't finished yet." I circled back and looked around the deserted lobby. "Gary, have you disappeared?" "I don't understand." The speaker's subtle hum was all that came. From them, no response whatsoever. Then, suddenly, the store's illumination dwindled, casting an unsettling shadow across the aisles, as if it were beckoning me back. The scanner I had left behind earlier began to beep increasingly loudly and persistently in the distance. I fought against the grip of desperation as I sought out another way out. Not only that, but the fire alarm, the back doors, and the emergency exits. They were all either sealed, locked, or not working properly. At this point, the shop seemed to be breathing. The walls pulsed softly, as if they were alive. The low, resonant drone of the lights had grown louder and was now rattling around in my chest. Then I beheld a concealed entrance in the far corner of the stockroom, which had previously escaped my notice. Unmarked and plain it was, alongside which is a keypad. I could tell the scanner was beeping from beyond that door because it had gotten so much louder, almost deafening, as I had nowhere else to turn. I made my way towards it. The numerals rearranged themselves in an unsettling mechanical way as the keypad blinked. I reached for a button and pressed it before I could resist. A narrow staircase wound its way downward into the darkness as the door hissed open. At the foot of the stairway, I paused, my gut telling me to go back. As it rose from the ground, the air was chilly and musty, with an almost metallic tang. I had to push myself onward because I could hear heavy, purposeful footsteps behind me. The stairs appeared to stretch on indefinitely, the faint illumination from the store above diminishing with each stride. The farther I dug, the chillier it got. The concrete walls were rough and damp, and the low-volume hum I detected in the store became increasingly audible and mechanical. I was greeted by a vast underground hall upon reaching the bottom. A multitude of televisions stretched along the walls, each showing a different section of the store, the aisles, the break room, and the parking lot. People, stalkers like myself, were moving robotically in sync across all of the screens. Gary sat with his back to me at the room's center, gazing at a gigantic apparatus, its outside adorned with illuminated panels and flashing lights. Captivated him. An unearthly blue light emanated from the machine as it pulsed with a subtle, extraterrestrial energy. "Tell me what I'm looking at," my voice trembling. I demanded. Unnervingly composed, Gary slowly spun around. "Shoppers of tomorrow will look up to this Jack." He held my gaze. "I am terrified. Can you please clarify what you mean? What the fuck is happening?" He then made a motion toward the screens. "Maximizing productivity while decreasing room for human mistake has long been a core value at Walmart. However, in this store, we have achieved perfection. A bigger system, of which the scanners and the rules are a part, regulates not only the store, but also the individuals who work there." It made my stomach turn. "You have us under your thumb, indoctrinating us, not brainwashing." Optimizing. Gary grinned faintly. I retreated a step, my knees quivering. With my voice barely audible, I said, "The rules, aren't they meant for More than just us, whatever this is, they're for it. Gary's grin darkened. Ensuring the system runs smoothly, the rules serve as safeguards. Instability is caused when individuals who like you stray. That's why you need to leave. The scanner beeped again, and I noticed it was now in Gary's hands. He held it up, the screen glowing with a final message: Jack Turner, terminate. Just as I was about to respond, a shadowy figure with red eyes emerged from the shadows. It moved silently, its long limbs and distorted face looking more machine than man. Its glowing eyes locked onto mine, and it reached out for me with unnatural precision. I screamed and bolted for cover. The next morning, they discovered my abandoned car in the parking lot, with the keys still in the ignition, inside the store. They found no sign of me. Instead, they found a single scanner lying on the floor of aisle 12. It screened flashing a final rule: follow the rules or become part of the system.